Colin, what's happening, man?
What is up?
Thanks for joining us, brother.
Yes, thanks for having me. Finally, I mean, we've talked about this for so long.
We have. So
Been
we
a long
did.
time coming.
We ran the numbers. So May 28th was the first time you came on the podcast, episode 50.
22. It's 2022,
Yeah,
right?
May
Yeah.
28th, 2022. So for anyone that hasn't listened to you there, check out your first appearance. It was an incredible episode. And we were saying that our progression between the three of us has been really cool because I basically went from binging your content to you being a podcast guest to us becoming friends and now business partners.
Yep.
So a lot can happen in less than a year.
It is who, not how. I was just telling your intern how important it is to be around the right people. He's already doing it. And then he's sitting in the room with us, just soaking it up.
Just a sponge.
Yeah. And we had gotten connected through Anthony Gustin because we sat down with him for dinner in February of 2022. And he was like, hey, I want to connect you guys with a couple people. But he looked at me and pointed to me and he was like, you kind of remind me a little bit of my friend Colin. I think you guys have shared energy. And that was the first time I'd heard of you before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was living in San Diego at the time. And the way that you set up your Better Human podcast is your podcasts are probably anywhere from like a 5-minute, 3-minute solo recording to like 30 minutes.
Mhm.
So I went on a road trip from San Diego to LA and I probably binged like 30 episodes of your show. And I was like, this guy's perspective is so good. And I felt like I was learning from you every single episode. And I remember thinking, I just want to get to know this guy and become friends. Yeah.
Dude, that's so powerful. I wish I could see that data when I'm like on my end somehow.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because you see one listen, you're like, oh, that's nothing. But like one listen could be one live changed or one impact. And then it completely reframes how you think about like faceless, nameless numbers,
Mhm.
right? And I think a lot of more small creators need that perspective. Like I'll get an email every so often. It's like, dude, you changed my life. Or I lost 40 pounds. So I did this thing from this one carnivore video.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thanks. Because honestly, this past week, I felt like this is annoying as fuck to do this all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, can I cuss on
Yeah,
this?
yeah, you
Okay. Because it's like, you get into the grind, like every day is like 100 views. And the algorithms are worse nowadays.
Yeah.
But dude, 100 views, if you think about it, could be 100 people in a room.
We couldn't fit 100
Listening to
people
you.
in this room.
Exactly. If they were listening to you and you were given to talk to 100 people, you would think that's a big deal. So I try to visualize that, you know?
Dude, well, I think I could hang my hat on being the person who's listened to your Gravemind video the most, but also my entry into your content was like listening to those Gravemind videos and then it skipped to one of your actual podcasts where you were talking, and you have an amazing way of just like speaking into the camera and going on these monologues that are so impactful. Like Brett was saying, 10 to 15 minutes. Like, when did you start doing that? Like when was that? When did that light bulb go off for you to just be like, I'm just going to start putting out information on the internet and just see what sticks?
I think it was before the 2020s. I got heavily into it during the 2020s because I was like, oh, I'm locked out here in Wimberley, 10 acres, nothing to do, nothing's open, right? And so I got heavily into carnivore at the time. I was like, let's just do it. I'm gonna go hardcore, straight carnivore. Like my buddy Logan Sneed, he had done it for a while. He's a brain cancer survivor, big keto guy. And I always kept hearing people talk about it, but this was before carnivore was like what it is today. It's like, yeah, let's just try it. And then I was like, oh, SEO opportunity here. Like, look at all the videos that people have done, like all these search terms that I know are in Google, look at the Google trends, and I just started recording. But I was doing short form stuff before then. It's hard to pinpoint. I don't know. I mean, I just started talking to the camera and my style, this is what it is. I just figured it out. Okay. Go back to early on when I got into guitar. I did not like learning songs or chord after chord or whatever. I wanted to just like put on a Led Zeppelin or Stevie Ray and just a pentatonic freestyle lead it all day long. Right. So it's like, that's more my personality. And so even to this day when I'm like, dude, I should script a YouTube video. I should like do this, like, and like do the right clips. I'm just like, I just want to talk about something for 10 minutes and just go and really refine that almost as like my style. Kind of Gary Vee in that way where he more just like goes at it. And every time I try to script or do something that I think I see other people doing, because I think that's the right way, I realize like, I'm just trying to force myself and be something I'm not. And I just kind of come back to that. So really, I mean, I put in a lot of reps and I still think I want to, like, even right now talking about this, I want to just go record. It's so motivating to hear that. I'm telling you, like, I'm going to go record tomorrow a bunch, So I don't know what the answer is, but it's just, I love it. Right. So
there's almost like two parts of what you guys were saying. Like 100 people, you look at that and you're like, holy shit, that's nothing. Like you said, you can't even fit 100 people into a singular room, let alone who are those 100 people that are actually going to binge your content? Because it's like with your podcast, we were both listening to it. We're like, we want to build a relationship with this guy. We were the right two people and we ended up becoming your business partner too. So you just don't know who's lurking or who's consuming your content. But you're also very interesting because you started with carnivore, but your videos, you don't have, I wouldn't say you have a particular niche. It's like you talk about carnivore, you talk about nutrition, you talk about entrepreneurship, talk about Bitcoin. It's like there's so many different interests that you have, and you just kind of speak it out into the universe and speak to the camera. And it's a very special ability to be able to do that, because I think it's much harder to be able to just sit in front of a camera and speak to a topic for an extended period of time versus like sitting with a guest and just asking the right questions and kind of pushing the conversation along.
Well, thanks. Yes. I'm telling you, it makes me want to do it even more. Cause I started doing it again.
Yeah.
Actually. Right. And I'm doing the clips and everything. I got the setup again where it looks nice and crisp with the DSLR. I love that bokeh, or is it called bokeh or whatever the background is? I love that shit. And I keep trying to come back, like, let me just like have 3 points and let me clip whatever. And then I literally on my phone, I'll have Notion with all my notes and everything I'm supposed to say. Like, and I just like, I see the first point and I don't look at it again until 10 minutes are up. And I'm like, shit, there's all these other points I was supposed to get to. So I guess if there's a lesson in there, it's like, maybe just keep doing what obviously is working. So I'm getting feedback. I don't get as much of that feedback because the algorithm's like you to do one thing. So there is that, right? Yeah. But just keep being more of who you are and doing what you're doing, and embrace that long, hard grind, right? And then I think if you're putting out like content, for example, you will get small bits of feedback every so often. Like every so often when I'm feeling a lull, somebody emails me or says something. It's like weird how the universe just like decides to poke me again. Hey, don't forget, this matters, you know?
Right.
Do you have a sense of how many videos you've created since early COVID?
I don't know if it's since then, but in aggregate, I've done at least 1,000 videos.
Wow.
I mean, potentially like 1,500. I mean, if you count even like videos on the phone where I'd go on the yard and just like talk about one idea and then just not use it, like just tons.
And my follow-up question to that was, have you noticed any big changes in terms of like the way you speak or your communication style? And do you have any recommendations for people that want to just put out more content speaking to the camera, but like, you know, they don't know, they don't know how they're going to be perceived, or if they, you know, if they just want any recommendations for how to improve?
Pause, as I just did, right? That's powerful. It's also edit your own stuff. Like, okay, example here, friend, she talked about wanting to do a YouTube channel for years. I'm like, okay, did you record your video? No? Okay, so I'll give her advice. Go with a window here, natural sunlight, camera here, so you have the right lighting, very basic. Put your camera on this landscape, right? And then record for 5 minutes on a topic, right? You're an expert in gut health. Talk about that, okay? Every time we get together, like 3 months, 6 months, whatever, have you done that video? No. You do want to do a YouTube channel? Yes. What like, it's math. What's missing here other than some kind of like inner belief or whatever, like some deep-seated trauma, who knows what it is, right? But I know it's not about like anything but that, because you just have to do the first thing the first time, right? Or like friends and family over the years, they all want to start businesses, okay? Get to one customer, one sale, $1, right? And you would not believe the amount of questions I get around, well, what about my LLC? What about if they ask me if I'm a business? I don't have a logo yet. I'm just like, literally none of that matters.
Yeah.
And I've said it so many times to people over the years that I know they don't hear me. I say, it doesn't matter. I bootstrapped 20 million e-com sales. I have multiple businesses, many have failed, whatever. None of that matters. Take my word for it. Just go out there and try to get a sale. And they don't. I don't even remember what the original question was, but I know that like happens all the time, that it frustrates me. Edit your videos. That was a question. It was about like that. Yes. Turn it on landscape, talk to the camera, one point or one topic, try to be engaging, use quotes, whatever. Use a story. Story's good. Something I should do more. I more go to books and quotes and things that I remember, but individual personal stories are just massive. You become a good storyteller to a camera, you can write your ticket. You can do anything, right?
Yeah.
And then edit where the ums, the ahs, that shit all day long. You edit like 100 of those videos, you will cringe. You'll die inside a little bit every time you hear it. And then eventually you won't do it anymore. And then you'll pause. And I still, to this point though, feel like if I want to take the next level, if I was going to go into speaking more, I would actually hire a coach and just like, I want to be like the best, you know. It's just not one of those things. Like, it's just a cool mastery thing. But yeah, you start editing your own videos, your speaking will improve tremendously. And I can't tell you how much that would translate to dating, sales, business, life, whatever.
One of the things I've grown to really respect about you is it seems like your thinking is very frictionless. Like, you don't let a lot of things stop you from doing something. Is that something you learned early on in your entrepreneurial journey? Or was that something you had to learn, like, hey, I just can't let these fears get in my way of putting out good content, or just taking a swing at putting up a new style of YouTube video?
That's interesting, because like I'd have to think about myself. Is my thinking frictionless? I think I'm willing to say I'm not sure. and then point to maybe ways that I could figure out how to figure it out or do experiments to figure it out. Whereas I think a lot of people, when they're asked a question or they're just talking, they feel like they're supposed to have some right answer. And I just think that that makes no sense. It's bullshit. It's kind of like saying science is capital S science. Like, science is a process. It's not a destination. I think any question you're asked is like a maybe this is correct or kind of correct or can lead you to be correct. But it's not about like you're answering and this school did this for sure, because like multiple choice, one's right.
Right.
The reality is multiple choice, probably all of them are fucking right if you change some parameters here or there a little bit or whatever, right? Or if the context is slightly changed. So I just think being willing to do that. And then, I mean, yeah, like I've read a lot of books and consumed a lot of information. It does help you to kind of like bring things front of mind. And plus I've done a lot actually.
Yeah.
You know, if you've read a lot and then you've done a lot, stuff just comes. You know, but then also being willing to not have like your ego wrapped up in something you said or didn't say, or if you think it's right or wrong. And everything's testable, dude. As a marketer, a business owner, like I've learned over the years, like you can do a product one day. We talked about this the other day, like how every product's kind of like own microcosm of like what may or may not work. It could be the same exact product. It could have the same copy, the same market, the same demographic, but then the label just looks a little bit different this way and it doesn't resonate and it doesn't scale. And one product, you're like, you have no idea, but then out of nowhere, the Amazon algorithm takes it to the fucking moon.
Right.
It's like that shit happens all the time.
Right.
And that's why so much of like virality and products that go like that go to like mud water or athletic greens, like there's probably 100 other brands trying to do mud water and athletic greens right now. And I guarantee you they're not going to have the same scale,
Right.
you know? And like, who knows why? You can't really know why. Right.
Yeah.
So,
And the only way to get that virality is to actually have skin in the game and start. And like what you're saying is so many people, they'll come back to you, thousands of iterations and questions of, oh, should I do this? How should I do that? And it's like, no, dude, just record your first video or make your first sale. That's the only way. You have to start. And you mentioned, you know, making your first sale in e-com. I know you have a great story with Wild Foods, your supplement company, how you were doing CrossFit and you were buying these massive bags of whey for yourself. And you just were like, well, fuck, I think there's actually a business here and I could sell this to people. So can you tell that story? Because it's awesome.
yeah. Well, so Rainy Street's right over here. It's when there used to be these old houses and bars before they turned it into skyscrapers, right? $1 billion in real estate. I was on one of the two buildings that were there. I moved in and I was like heavily into bulletproof coffee, which I got to give Dave Asprey mad credit for that. Paleo diet, Primal, Mark Sisson, like all these early kind of pioneers, if you will. And then I started making the connection between like when I cook food at home and I really read the labels and I try to get local, good quality stuff, like everything's better and easier. And my abs just came out finally. Cause I was doing like the bodybuilding thing for years and like that wasn't working. And I wasn't willing to do the extra curricular activities in the locker room, right? As some of the other people I was training with were. And so I was like, I gotta be the natural route. And I tried like pre-workouts, No Explode, like all these BSN brands, like just loaded with crap. And I still couldn't get that kind of like lean shredded look I wanted. Found CrossFit. That got me into like zone diet, paleo, got me into really thinking about quality versus quantity of food and nutrition. And then sourcing and where stuff comes from became like the most important thing because I was like taking all these supplements. I was doing a morning bulletproof coffee with all these different brands. And I'm thinking to myself, like on these labels, it doesn't say anything about how this product is made or where it comes from. Like supplements, for example, even to this day, like get some random supplement, like a Now Foods ZMA, and it just says 3 extracted constituent parts. And there's nothing about what it's come from, where, like, what food did it come from? Did it come from a rock, from a tree, from a food, from a mushroom? Like, no idea. And so, like, even to this day, there's just not a lot there. And that kind of then led me to, I'm going to start buying stuff for myself, right? And so I was using a lot of whey at the time, because like very active, CrossFit, whatever. And non-denatured, cold processed, grass-fed whey was kind of like the thing that, like, the best you could find, right? And there's a few brands doing it. And I wanted to try to source that for myself. And so I found this company that makes it proprietary. It's a very unique process where they have to pasteurize it a little bit, but it's like the lowest temp, and then they immediately air cool it. So what they're trying to do is preserve all that fragile properties of raw milk to the best that you can within United States regulatory framework. There's only so much you can do. And then that comes over from Australia, super clean, high quality organic pastures. And the stuff, like, it's whey, so it's a powder, but it's not as chalky, and it's got a little bit of that milk flavor still there. Whereas a lot of whey protein from like Optimum, whatever, it's just like flavorless, tasteless, like powder. It's like chalk, right?
Right.
And I was like, this stuff's amazing. And so I would get 20 kilogram bags, which is 44 pounds, that are like this big, right? And you're lugging them around because it's a bag, you know. And I would get like 5 of those delivered to my front door on Rainy Street in that 1-bedroom studio apartment. And then I would like open it up, whey would go over my cabinets had like a film of whey all over, and I'd make up the bulletproof coffee, whatever. And then like, I was always into podcasts, but I got into like Smart Passive Income, Pat Flynn, some of these other like business marketing podcasts, and Amazon FBA kept coming up as a thing. So I was just like, let's try it. Like, let's like list something, right? So I got some craft coffee bags. I would put 1.3 pounds in there, seal it. I had some labels made up, put that label on. And that first month, January 2015, we did like $500 in sales. No ad spend, no marketing, nothing, right? Next month we did 1,500, 3,000, 6,000. Within 6 months, I think we were about 50. And I'd launched a couple other products with that. Like we did a local coffee, a couple other things. So I probably had like 5 to 7 SKUs. That first year we did $500,000. And I'm just like, well, okay. I mean, shit, this is the universe telling me this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I just, kept expanding products and eventually took that business to multi-millions of dollars and then sold half of it. And then a lot of bad things happened with that, and recently bought the company back and still doing it.
Was that your first foray into D2C e-com?
Yeah, I had a CrossFit gym, an MMA gym back in Florida. A juice bar was my first business. I was a professional poker player before that. That's it, I think.
I love the poker part of your story.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
It's so interesting because so much of poker is psychology, which I know you love. And I'm sure that that has to help you in business, right? Like understanding poker and understanding where to play, where to make bets, where to lean in.
Yep.
Have you seen that? Like, do you still make those parallels today? Like, oh wow, I kind of like learned that when I was sitting at the poker tables. You were in Vegas, right?
You're unlocking Pandora's box of stories and information right now. So, okay, it goes back before poker, right? So there's a game called Age of Empires 2, Age of Kings. Some people may have played it back in the day if you're a PC gamer. I was one of the top deathmatch players on the planet. Like to this day, I recently like loaded it up recently, actually was playing again, and I wasn't even trying, and I'm just crushing people, like top score or whatever. And I'm just like, it's like riding a bike. It's insane. And so it was one of those things I found where I'm talking like 10,000 hour Malcolm Gladwell, like for sure. By the time I was 20, I had put 10,000 hours into that thing for sure. And so one of the best in the world at that, real-time strategy. So it's kind of like StarCraft, or it's not a shooter like Fortnite, but I'm telling you, like as any gamer will tell you, when you're in and you're in the middle of a game, it's flow. It's intense. You can't do anything else. If somebody tries to talk to you, like, Mom, go away. Like I'm in a game. And like, so it's the most intense consuming thing that you could probably do in front of a computer. That's not like, I mean, online poker similar to that though, because that's where the parallel is, right? I don't really know of anything else you could do where it's like that live, like on demand, other than like gaming that way, or like a physical sport, right? So that really led me into poker a lot because intensity of focus, highly competitive. In Age of Empires, you didn't really have anything on the line, but your rating would go down, right? It's kind of similar to chess rating, where you had like 1,600 as starting and you go up or down. And so when you lost, like it was brutal to the ego, man. Like you were, and there was a lot of shit talking. Like there was a lot, I said a lot of things that would not be PC today at all, right? It would definitely get me canceled back in the day, but I'm a 15-year-old kid, whatever. So it's like, it taught me quite a bit. And then I had some friends that we played and we had a clan, and like, there's a lot of cool camaraderie and stuff like that. In fact, probably the most favorite time of my life was being able to play what we called a Bish game, which was the Bish clan, BISH. That was the name of our clan, the Bish clan. And we would all play in the same neighborhood in the different computers. And then we'd play a game, and then I would ride my bike over and we would go like talk about the game. And I could tell I was definitely more into it than everyone else, usually because I won and I wanted to talk about it. But it's like, I'm telling you, just some of the most fun memories of my life, they're right there. So it's like that led into poker, which was then leads into entrepreneurship massively. The two things with poker, to keep the story short, I found Buddhism through Tommy Angelo, who was like a poker guy, like wrote a book. I think he was like a writer or something else. And he found Buddhism to help him with this poker game because like tilt and money management, I'm telling you, like it's like poker can ruin your life, dude. Like it's a very fine line between managing money and not like being suicidal at times if you go to work and lose 10 grand, like shit like that. So it's like I found Buddhism that way, and I made the connection to like quitting well, control your mindset, not going on tilt, all the things that every poker player deals with. Some people better than others. They call it going on tilt when you're just like upset about a hand and you just basically lose all your money very shortly after, because like your frontal lobe cortex just like doesn't work anymore. It's just like the reptilian kicks in, you're just pissed. And so that was huge for getting me into philosophy. And then also just like mindfulness and like being in the moment and whatever. And the other thing is money management, right? Because like, for example, the other day, we had a $10,000 pallet of materials that just like got lost. Freight company's like, oh, sorry, I don't have it. it's like, I have customers. I'm on back order. And I just gave you all this money. I prepaid for this thing. And it's like, most people dealing with something like that, where you basically lose $10,000. I mean, that's brutal, right? Like, you got to sleep with that. You got to wake up the next day. What if you have no money? What if it's going to take your business? Like, there's just so many of these mental battles you deal with as an entrepreneur, getting sued, people stealing from you. Like, I mean, it's endless. I just brush stuff off so much better now. Not always. Usually stuff lingers with me for 24 hours. And then like the next day, I'm just like, back, let's focus. You know? And only the things that really linger are like the really severe things. Cause I mean, like you just write off money left and right. Like, that's a mistake, or that didn't work, whatever. And sometimes it's significant amounts of money. And poker definitely helped with that. It still sucks, but I mean, it's more like, I look at it as a lesson or an investment in learning, rather than like, it's a loss and I'm not going to get it back. And I get into like, scarcity based thinking, whatever. And
do you remember any big hands?
Oh yeah. So there's a couple sessions where I played heads up with this guy on Full Tilt Poker when that was still a thing. And I think each of those sessions I won between 10 and 20 grand each session. So it was more of a heads up session. There were a couple big hands. I think I played 100, 200 one time with some of the pros, like Phil Ivey was at the table. And I don't remember if I won any money. I might've lost on that one. I don't remember. I just remember the stakes. And it's usually more of like a session basis. Cause I wasn't playing games where you're like winning $100,000. Like, a big pot might be like 20 to 40,000 on some games. And like some games might be smaller, like a big pot's 5,000, but yeah, there's definitely been some big sessions. And I've had multiple days where I've lost 10 to 15 grand in a day, probably like at least 5 of those. And those are just pretty brutal. But then you had days where you won that much and you're like, let's go get sushi. Yeah. Sushi's on me.
Was there ever a period in your life where you actually thought about going the conventional path or working a corporate job? Or did you always just realize that you were cut from a different cloth than most people?
Yeah. I don't know if there was. So I went to community college because I didn't know what else to do. And that didn't work out. Every year from basically high school on, it was like, I'm going to be different this year. I'm going to get good grades. I'm going to study. And then like, sleep deprivation kicks in, playing AOK too late at night kicks in. And then you just don't care anymore because you're so far behind. I'm telling you, like, when it comes to schooling, it's just so not set up for, I think, humans really. Like, and some people are going to do fine. Some people aren't. Most people aren't, I don't think. It's also very, I think, scarcity kind of focus, where it's like, if you don't do this, you get a bad grade and then you'll be shamed. Like, a lot of it I just think is wrong for a lot of reasons. And it didn't work for me. And it's like, but if you gave me something that was like Age of Empires or poker, where it's like, okay, this is a mastery-based game. You can get in the flow state. You can connect what you do to some kind of outcome and you can control that outcome. That's what entrepreneurship is, right? Nobody told me that in high school, dude. I remember I was probably like 20 years old or something, where somebody's like, yeah, that guy owns that gas station. And I said to him, what do you mean he owns it? I thought like these mega corporations owned everything. Yeah. Nobody in my entire life had basically been like, yeah, you can own a small business. I'm telling you, it was not a thing. Entrepreneurship was not a thing. Went to college, whatever. And then even before then, poker and like the Chris Moneymaker phase, that was like a thing that led me into kind of being an entrepreneur, because you manage your own money, you set your own schedule, but you still got to put hours in. I would grind. They call it grinding. You spend like 8 hours a day or longer playing tables online, going to the casino, whatever, right? So, yeah.
What do you think makes a good entrepreneur through your experience, and then also just through like reading? You just consume so much information. I'm curious what your take would be on that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about being a good entrepreneur is, if there's definitely principles that are applicable to everybody. Like, if you can't deal with loss and things not working out, then you'll never be an entrepreneur, because that's pretty much like all you do all the time. And then you're just trying to like keep swerving to what works, right? So you have to be able to deal with that. You have to be able to think long term, because you can potentially make no money. I mean, like, for example, I just bought the company back. I don't make any money from that. I haven't made any money from that business in 9 months. That means I've not cut a single check from a business for 9 months, which is kind of like my primary thing. I make money from other things because I had to, but it's like, it's not even a question. It's like, this is my business. I built this thing. I have a path. I'm going places, but there's no question where I don't just show up today because I'm not making any money, because then the entire thing would go away. That's not even a thought in my mind. Right. You know what I'm saying? And if I start getting to the point where it's hard, and it does get hard, and I kind of get sick of doing the same thing, which I'm actually slowly getting to that point, and that's why I've been hiring more people and doing more automations. Is like, I kind of want to get out of that, the basics. which was good when I bought it back to get back into the business, and I got to get out of it again. But then I can now decide, do I want to like sell this thing? Do I want to grow it? Like I have optionality, you know? And that's why I think about business is so amazing, because when you build a business and it lives on its own with its own customers, it's its own living entity. It's like a child that becomes like a teenager and maybe eventually an adult. And it just lives and breathes and does its thing. And as long as you're kind of nurturing it a little bit, feeding a little bit, it can even grow, you know? And so it gives you such amazing optionality, but you have to be like willing that if you have like a down quarter, or you get sued, or you lose a pallet, or one of a million things happens, you still have to show up tomorrow and get it done. You know what I'm saying? And some people love that. And like, I guess you could even say I do like that, because it's like connected to what I do, my mastery, like, you know, outcomes, whatever. But not everybody should do it. Because like I used to think most people should. Nope. But I think everybody could at least maybe be like a freelancer, or at least like have some clients, or like do some client work, or like at least be a remote employee. Like if you're going to work for a company, start by controlling where you live. So if you want to be remote, negotiate that, and then live anywhere in the world. Then you can start maybe acting where you're more of a services business, where you like work for multiple companies and you're not beholden to any one, and you set your own terms. You do what you did do in this big faceless corporation, but now they just companies pay you a service fee every month, and you can fire clients, you can take on new clients, you can grow, you can not grow. I just think like almost everybody could probably do that. That's kind of like the new gig economy Naval talks about too, where he's like, eventually, even like Hollywood, for example, you'll have people come together, they'll do a movie. In fact, it's already kind of like this, I guess, but for all kinds of businesses. You come together with a bunch of gig providers, and then you do the thing, and then you just disperse and go like do the next one or go somewhere else, you know? So yeah, not everybody should be an entrepreneur though.
Well, that was going to be one of my follow-up questions to Harry's point, is when you're talking about like the spirit of entrepreneurship, risk tolerance, kind of having blinders on, like front sight vision, blocking out a lot of these other things that could happen as an entrepreneur. Do you think that behavior can everyone learn that? Can that be trained? Can that be programmed? Or is some of this stuff just like intrinsic?
The answer is nurture is always going to overcome nature. That's what I believe. Because let's take an example of somebody that was traumatized as a child. Like tragic shit happens every day. Shouldn't, but it does. And we all have our own traumas, you know, and they're all relative to us. And I don't think we should have the victim Olympics trying to compare who has more traumas or not, because every person I've ever met has trauma.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, whatever your worst trauma is your worst trauma. What the fuck does that have to do with my trauma? Mm-hmm. My trauma is my trauma, your trauma is your trauma, right? So aside from that, it's like, if you have those traumas and you had it really rough growing up, then you can still have the tools in your environment to adapt and learn and grow. Or you can look at it as poor me, I'm a victim. You give up your agency and you're basically a victim and you're stuck and you don't grow for your entire life. That's why I believe nurture is always more powerful than nature. You know, and if you actually look at like what we can do with modern technology and all the therapies and tools we have around in modern medicine, and you know, like we can control so much of maybe nature's mistakes that may have been made through, you could say, nurture, which is just like controlling things from an environmental perspective, right? So I believe everything and absolutely everything can be trained. But most people aren't going to do that, because if you want to develop skills as an entrepreneur, you have to be around other entrepreneurs. And if you're already around other entrepreneurs, you're probably an entrepreneur. It's this weird, like, is it the cart or the horse, or I don't know, right? But it's just the way it is. And if you aspire to be that, you have to look at the people around you. Are they victim-based thinking, scarcity mindset? Are they like, do they think entrepreneurship is weird or too risky? Or like your parents, they're always chapping in your ear about get this job or get that job or whatever. Until you break free from that, or at least balance it out with other people that think entrepreneurship is normal, you won't do it. Like, I will bet on it. You will never do it until you change that first. And this also applies to every single behavioral change in your life. Whatever you want is first determined by what's around you in your environment. You go there first. And that's the hardest thing to do though, because like it might be like somebody you love, it might be a significant other, it might be your family, it might be all these things for years and years you've been shamed into like, you have to be this way, whatever. It is really hard to break cultural indoctrination and things around you that way, right? And so your desire has to be so much so, and this is where I think that desire, and like some people kind of naturally fall into these things, I think that is there. And you could even say in my situation, maybe I was lucky that I did have a small family, right? And like my dad was always very supportive, but I mean, we don't have like a lot of aunts and uncles, like one sister. I'm basically like the head of the household. So I've always had this freedom where like, I kind of just like lead everyone else. But what if I had all these other people that were like, kind of like role models to me, and they all lived a different lifestyle, and that wasn't as cool? I mean, I probably wouldn't have ended up this way. I don't know. Maybe I would have. Maybe I would have been like that outlier that like went out and did my own thing. It's hard to say, right? But I do think it's some combination of both of those, and we can still boil it around to the first principles. If you want to do something different with your life, you have to go to the people and things around you and the content you're consuming. And until you change that, nothing you want to change will happen. Like for sure.
Yeah. I can't help but think about when you talk about nurture, just the importance of sports or games or things that you can develop a little bit of mastery at a young age. I think all three of us share a commonality there, where it's like we played baseball, we got to a point where we were like substantially good enough to go play in college.
Yep.
And you with gaming and just like excelling, being one of the best in the world. And I think that teaches you a lot of valuable lessons about not being a victim. And when you do run into adversity, you understand how to handle that. And I think that for most people trying to be entrepreneurs, that ability to actually handle loss is really taught at a young age. You really can't learn that later in life. It's very tough because it's just ingrained in how you respond to things. It's a response at that point.
100%. I mean, I think sports is probably the perfect example of that, because it's like, if you drop the ball or you miss the pitch, like who missed the pitch and dropped the ball?
Dude, there's no worse feeling than when a ball goes through your legs or like, you strike out to like end a rally or end the game,
right?
And you're just like, that was on me.
Accountability.
Yeah, and there's no way to blame it on somebody else.
Yeah.
Like you could maybe try, oh well, he threw a slider at me, but it's like that's within the rules of the game. So what are you talking about? Of course he did. It's like, who cares? Like it literally, it always directs it back to you. And I think anything that gets gives you rapid feedback. That's the thing. In fact, Definitely. It was Naval said this recently, or somebody quoted him saying that, Malcolm Gladwell's thing about 10,000 hours is it's a cool story, but it's not the whole story, because he said it's about 10,000 iterations. It's not about 10,000 hours. You get 10,000 iterations if you're playing something where the feedback loops are hyper fast and you're adapting whatever, right? Like, and there's a lot of examples of this. Like, there's like a famous skateboarder. He got a deal with Nike, and they just say he's a natural. He just will adapt to things in real time. And he's just so good at doing that. And he just learns so fast. And like, he's like the best in the world because he does that. And I think you probably can see the parallels to that in other athletes or whatever. It's like, they have figured out, or the Tiger story. Like, I mean, look at some of the unhealthiness around him. And like, if you like read I think it's a biography or that was around him.
And there's that HBO documentary about him.
Yeah. And there's also the Founders podcast guy did an episode of him, and like his parents were just like tyrannical, whatever. But I mean, he had that where, like, even the caddy would do things where the caddy would give him wrong information because he thought it would help him play better. So maybe he says that the shot is further away, or that his opponent's further along, like shit like that, and you're just like, I mean, it's fascinating, the human mind, right? But I think very rapid feedback as much as possible. Iterate, right?
I love what you were saying around nurture, about how surrounding yourself with the right entrepreneurs and partners can kind of like dewire some of that societal programming. And Harry and I have been on the receiving end partnering with you on Noble. And I think a really good example is, so we connected because we were first talking about partnering on Twitter. We iterated really quickly. We started talking about, hey, what would our dream supplement look like? What do we wish existed? We thought about this incredible animal-based protein powder, beef protein, organs, collagen, colostrum, all this amazing shit. We went from an idea to 60 days later, we're literally ready to release something so fast. And then the invoice actually came up to pay that first product. And, Harry and I, we work corporate jobs since we graduated college in 2016, 2017. And, paying that first invoice, there was like maybe Brett and Harry version 1.0 of like, fuck, like here's serious skin in the game. This is like a legitimate invoice. It's the most amount of money we've ever really invested in something. And you were really the one that like gave us that push that we needed. And we're like, dude, maybe having some skin in your game, having some skin in the game and then back against the wall is actually a really good thing. And I think about like, would I have had the fortitude to have actually invested in that if we didn't have like a third partner? But it all comes from like surrounding yourself with really good partners, entrepreneurs that have been there before, that can sometimes give you the push when you don't actually have that. Yeah.
And I tried to not push. I tried to attract by like laying out the positioning, right? Because I could have been like, dude, we talked about this. You said this, you were going to do this. I was more like, I actually just need to convince these guys that they're making the right decision, because I want them to make that decision. Yeah. Because again, like, so a book that came out recently, Power versus Force, David Hawkins, I believe. I need to read it, but I keep hearing people talk about it.
I hear about it a lot too.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, it's kind of like the push versus pull. And I think he defines it as power is that thing where you more attract, whereas force is more forcing. And if you actually look at duality, Wu Wei, Taoism, which for me, I think are just integral, everybody needs to understand these things. But when you force things, you actually tend to repel them and get the opposite effect of what you want. Whereas when you attract them, you know, like the example I always think of as a guy is like male to female relationship. Like if you're always chasing a girl down, her natural instinct is like, get away from me.
Right.
The second you just like don't respond to that text or don't call back or whatever, she's like, what is he doing? Is he thinking about me? Oh my gosh, she's talking about somebody else. It's like, I'm telling you, this is like the duality of the universe and these type of things. And you always want to try to attract things rather than force them. I've also learned this with employees, right? You've probably all seen it with like relationships where maybe you really wanted something to work out and that made you like have pretty bad behavior and you like did these things you wouldn't have done. And then eventually that relationship doesn't even work anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so I think with friendships, with relationships, with employees, it's kind of like, let's see how it goes and let's try to make it work so that everybody's here happily. And then they can feel good about the decision. Because if I have to convince you of that, then what's the next thing I have to convince you of? And then it just defaults to like, you're always having resistance to doing anything. And I'm just like having to convince you. And then we have this dynamic where it's almost like employee boss versus like co-founder.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing either. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think we did a good job. And I think to your guys' credit, I didn't do a ton of it. It was like one phone call and then you made the decision. So it's not like I had to like hound you about it or whatever. Right.
Yes.
But I was just kind of like trying to explain the way I visualize it is like, okay, if you got rid of, like if you invest that money and it's gone, poof. Okay. So what do you set back by 6 months?
Yeah.
6 months of savings for something that could change your life.
Totally.
Just do the math. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is that, you know, so like,
yeah. And I used the word push. It wasn't a push at all. And also what you did was like, you basically had us talk about and basically speak to the ideal vision of Noble and what we think it could become. And you were like, well, that vision doesn't happen without us actually like having skin in the game, putting that deposit down and turning this thing into reality. It's like that girl that doesn't create that YouTube video. It's the same exact thing. If you don't put the deposit down, that's the equivalent of never creating that first video too.
it's the price. Everything has a price, right?
Is it fun for you to have two other business partners? Or I mean, with the gym, you had other business partners, but I'm curious, like after doing the whole solo thing, are you excited to have two other partners on board?
Yeah. Well, at this time,
There's only one right answer because you're on the
yeah,
podcast.
yeah. The if it wasn't absolutely right, I wouldn't have done it really.
Mhm.
I mean, yes. And also it's funny you mentioned the gym, the two partners, because the original founders was me and two other roommate and another guy that came in. And the first guy stole money, then left. He wanted to come back to the business after he stole the money. He's like, stole the money. He's like, I'm holding it for you. And I'm like, no, dude, you've crossed the chasm. I can't come back from this. Cause now I have to worry about, what if we have 100 grand in the bank account? You're gonna take it tomorrow and you're gonna be like, I'm holding it. No, like, and it was one of those things where he was actually valuable to the business. And I was like really bummed because I wanted him to be in the business. But when you have principles, you don't go back on those principles, right? If your principle is that somebody doesn't steal your bank account, then you can never, ever, ever let that slide. And I knew that. And it's one of those things where I was kind of proud that I really stuck to that, because there was parts of me that was like, you know, he was just being emotional. Like, it'll be okay. And it's just one of those things that I've learned over the years. That's an example of forcing. If I would have forced him or like let him come back in, it would have been me forcing a partnership because it was more convenient to me in the short term, but it was way better in the long run. I knew it was better in the long run, so I didn't force it. And it actually worked out. It was much better, right? Because we actually had the best years of the business after that, right? And he missed out big time for sure. And in a way, I kind of feel bad. Like he shouldn't have acted emotionally and it would have been fine, but that you can't take back big things like that with other people, right? And then the other guy, he eventually left because he was like working on the mornings, and I had kind of like, I provided a lot of capital early on. So the thing was like, I don't have to work as much and I do the PM classes, and he just thought it wasn't fair. We were also paying him a salary to work. But I'm telling you, when it comes to partners and you have like sweat equity involved and there's money involved and like there's roles and divisions, it can get very tit for tat very fast. And if somebody like is kind of new to business, they don't understand these things. Like he thought the business was worth all this money. He thought we had to pay him all this money from a buyout. He got lawyers. We did arbitration. All that happened was, I think we like probably each collectively paid our lawyers like 20 grand, and we gave him like $5,000. So he basically netted a loss.
Yeah.
Because he was being so stubborn, and we were trying to give him something and make it fair. And he just like, I don't know if it's an ego thing or whatever. And so I hope he learned a lesson from that, you know? And I definitely learned a lesson from both those situations where don't send long, angry emails. Yeah. I'm very good at that.
Yeah.
I can really demean people hard, dude. Like, you know, I have a way with words, and I studied Gary Halbert copywriting for years when I got into this, that I can make you feel like shit via email. So I don't do it anymore, you know? And so I'm actually very, very cautious of like texts and emails like that. Like I try to soften them because you know how shit gets lost in translation. But it is a big thing. Like it's one of those things where if you really, you know, sometimes like a scar, even if it's not intended, can really be in somebody's subconscious for a long time, and it gets hard to repair that. So I'm just always way more measured. Even if it's like I'm perfectly justifiable in like calling somebody out or they're being lazy or whatever, I still to this day try to just like more time, ask some questions strategically, use the Socratic method, like just be less, you know, where you accuse somebody, accusational, is that what the word? Accusatory, yeah. So yeah, a lot of lessons learned from that. But after going solo for years, it was the perfect who not how because of this business. And because I didn't want to bootstrap it like the really, really hard way. Cause like, I mean, I've been a poor entrepreneur for 15 years is how I feel. Cause I'm always like reinvesting, doing whatever. And you know, I've been able to take some money out and have some assets on the side and I don't touch them. I have very long-term thinking, but I mean, as 38, my birthday 2 days ago, it's like, I want to be further along. So I'm as hungry as ever.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Outside of that hunger, I'm just curious, you know, is there anything about us that kind of like convinced you that you wanted to partner with us? Because I think there could be one camp of people that's like, all right, you're going to partner with two guys who haven't been in the CPG space before, and there's other people that maybe like see our skill set. I'm just curious, like, is there anything in particular about us that made you want to partner with us and go all in?
The 3 to 4 days where it was like we met here, then we went to Sapien, then we went over there. Like those 3 or 4 days were just like daily momentum. That was, I mean, honestly, I don't even know how it would have gone if that hadn't happened. And then people, like you guys know a lot of people. You're really good with that. You're doing the media side. It was just like so obvious, right? And so for me, I've always like identified that one of my, you could say weaknesses as an entrepreneur is I'm more inbound where I kind of like build things and then let people come to me. And there is a time, and that's part of entrepreneurship. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. Like go into monk mode, build shit for sure. Right. But you gotta build relationships and you gotta bring people to your thing. And like now in today's world where literally everything on every camera everywhere on the planet is like competing against your thing. Cause like you could get a piece of content or an ad or whatever for everything on the planet because it's all online. Or they could look at your ad or your business or your brand or your video. Dude, like that's why Netflix said back in the day, like Fortnite's their biggest competitor because kids are on Fortnite all day long instead of watching Netflix, right? You wouldn't think that a game is a competitor to Netflix streaming service, but it is, you know? And so I forgot the original point. People. That was the big one. So I've always identified that, and you guys just seem to do it so naturally. Everywhere I go, like either people know about you or know you personally or whatever. And I was like, them plus what I can do, holy shit. That's kind of how I thought about it in my mind.
Yeah.
And I mean, like it's kind of already played out if you just looked at what we've done so fast. But I think even in the next couple years, building this business, I just think it's gonna, it'll be a very nice, cohesive fit, and I think we'll see the results of that.
You talked about who not how. You said it a few times. I feel like it might as well just be tattooed on your forehead. Yeah. You've been beating into our skulls.
I got Tupac, 3 who months. Not how, like instead of Thug Life on my chest.
T-shirts.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that philosophy and what that means to you.
Yeah, so it's not mine. It's Dan Sullivan, co-authored a book with I think Dan Hardy, and he's like strategic coach guy. He's coached I think 7,000 entrepreneurs in his career. No, not many people know about him, but like he's the entrepreneur's coach, if you will. And so that was just something he identified from doing this for years with people. And like, and you know, you get entrepreneurs that come in, we all have our hurdles and the things we're good at, and we're all trying to get to the next level. Everybody's searching for something. That's what you'll see. He identified that for most of the people that were stuck in his program, whether it was stuck at 10 million, 1 million, 10,000, whatever it is, the answer was not how to do the thing to get to the next level. The answer was who to get to do the thing. Because like, for example, I can go on YouTube and learn how to do anything. I could basically learn quantum mechanics on YouTube for free, but like, what am I going to do with that? Or what, you know, like, or why should I do that? I shouldn't do that. Or I can learn how to code on YouTube, but if I want a software app, why wouldn't I just hire somebody, pay him X dollars to get this app I want to get built for my business or whatever? It's not the right use of my time. And so who not how is this idea that I identified when I was introduced to that, I was like, that's why I'm plateauing, because the things that I need, which are like the people, the sales, the media, the outbound side, which actually when I get pulled into it, I'm really good with people, but I have so much, I want to be a monk. Like part of me just like wants to go in forest and read books all day. You know what I'm saying? So it's like that. And I know that about myself. And so partnering somebody that will kind of like naturally pull me to that and pull me to other people and whatever will be so, I think just so transformational, you know? And you could even say in a short period of time, it's already happening with things we've done and people we've met and like KetoCon and all these people. Like there's a lot of cool things have happened. So I identified it before I met you guys, but then when I met you guys, I'm like, oh, this is what that meant. This is so obvious. And now I'm also thinking about it in my business, like, who's that person that's going to do supply chain? I can do supply chain, but I bet I could find somebody that's good with numbers and spreadsheets that could do it part-time, 10 hours a week. I could show them how to do it, build the systems. Bam, I found that guy. Somebody at Sapien knew him. He's been with me and he's amazing. Like, and I pay him like part-time to do it, something that was taking a lot of my time. And it's an amazing who, not how situation, you know?
How do you take that framework and make sure you make the right bets on the right people? So like, for instance, I think there's just a lot of people that you could, give time, energy, money to, and just like try to invest in them, but maybe they're not the right person that you want to be either partnering with or just like hiring. And I think that like vetting people is a very important part of the process.
Yeah. Edit out that by the way.
That's your first one.
Or the now is the word. Instead of it's at least it's a little bit better. Shit.
Stop the bleeding.
Pause. Don't force is the answer that we already talked about, right? Now, if there's a way for you to get data without, like, in the most organic way possible, then you do that. For example, interning, trying shit out. Maybe not hiring somebody. So this is what I do with hire people. We're going to do like 2 weeks or a month, whatever you think. I'm going to pay you the rate you would get paid, but then we're going to decide if you're going to stay. But this is not going to be me deciding. This is not like a performance evaluation where I want you to impress me. I want you to want to be here. I want you to find a niche in my company where you do work that you enjoy the most, that lights you up, because that's going to be how I derive the most value from you and how you derive the most value from me, period, right? And that's not forcing. That's not saying, here's your job, here's intense training, you do this thing, and if you don't meet these numbers, we fire you or whatever. Like, it's like maybe for Fortune 500 companies, but then eventually people leave because it's like soul sucking, And I think you're actually seeing the death of corporations, like big ones anyways. I think we're seeing this as companies are getting smaller and smaller for this very reason. And so you have to figure out a way to like work together or to go to market in some way, whatever thing you're doing, if you're trying to get customers or sales, or if you're trying to like write something together, like you have to get to doing the work on a period of time. Probably a month is enough if you're kind of going at it, and you figure out like, how are you communicating? What's the standard for showing up on meetings? Are they always late? Do they drop the ball? And you just kind of like over time, you build data points where you're like, yeah, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Right? Versus it's like, you're amazing and you have all this, you have this whole CV of all these amazing things you've done, and it's blah, blah, blah. But then you're actually like a lunatic or whatever, or like you fly off the handle every time, or all the things that people kind of like keep hidden come out, just like in relationships. That's why they say like, don't move in until you've, if you move in with somebody right away in a romantic relationship, then all their shit comes out, and then you're like, wow, I just signed a lease with this person, so you just don't force, and you have to get to the data somehow by like doing shit.
Yeah.
That's an interesting dichotomy with you, because you move really fast. So it would be easy to be like, oh, well, he probably hires people really fast, but you're very calculated with how you hire. You're the first one that brought that concept up to us, where it's like, do a trial with somebody before you bring them on full time, actually observe them, see how they work with you. And then after a month or 60 days or whatever that period is, set that period and then determine if you want to move on to the next level with them.
100%. Yep.
Another thing about you too in the local Austin community is people love the entrepreneurial masterminds that you do. And it's very clear that you have a passion for teaching, whether it's the YouTube videos that you do. I remember there were a few times where we were discussing Noble at the house and you would pull in Harry's little brother or like a couple other people because you wanted them to just observe and learn. Yep. So I'm just curious, like, where that passion for teaching comes from and how you've kind of cultivated that ability to teach over time.
Yeah, I know
it's a loaded question, but
it's a good question, but it's not low. How do you trace the origin of like who you are?
Yeah.
It's like, that's the question. It's like, I mean, so my dad died when I was 18, right? That's obviously hard. I remember hearing a quote years later. It was Pascal that said it. I don't know, maybe somebody can find it on the internet. It was like the best thing that a dad can do for a son is to die young or something like that. And I think what he was saying was that the motivation and or drive it gives you is like, there's something there to that. I'm not suggesting that people like, you want your dad to die because you can be a top performing entrepreneur, but like we all have these different motivations and drives, and sometimes it's hard to know how it comes from. Like for example, when that happened, I got heavily into stoicism because it was like, I didn't know where to turn. I wasn't the type to go talk to people or whatever. It was like, I kind of just handle my own shit. So I started reading Stoicism and philosophy, and I was like, oh, wow, this is insane, you know? And then like, even to this day, like I still reference the Stoics all the time because like they figured out what I believe are some of the first principles of life. It's like, you control your mind. I'm actually working on kind of this philosophy. I don't really have a name for it. It's kind of like the better human philosophy. It's a lot rooted in that idea, this idea that like nothing exists outside you. And because of that, because like you own your perception and only you can own and control your perception, then you are kind of like the center of the universe, and everything kind of goes out from you, and you have control over that. And so much what we see in the modern environment is like, in modern humans is like, they look to others for answers. They look to the state, to their parents, to their community, to the people around them. You don't find as many people that are kind of like internal out. It's more external in. And I think like that's the reason that Jocko Willink stuff like extreme ownership is popular. It's because it's like in an age where nobody wants to take ownership, he's just telling like and Jordan Peterson, for example, same thing. He's like talking to guys that feel kind of disenfranchised and just like saying, just get up and do shit, dude. Take ownership of your shit. Stop looking outside for permission or whatever. Because the reality is, what you see with modern humans is we look outside of ourselves to solve internal questions, but the internal questions are only found inside. That's what I think, you know? And that's why it never works when you go external. You can get all the money, all the people, have as much sex, like whatever you're pursuing. And then you're always left with those internal questions unanswered. And then you're wondering why, oh, I must need to do more. That's like the default. More. When I get 10 million, I'll be good. 3 million's not enough. Like, or whatever it is, on and on and on. Now I gotta get on the billionaires list or I'm not gonna be happy.
Right.
It's like a never ending need of more, as if more is the answer, even though more didn't work the first time. It's very bizarre.
If you had to distill down what like resources you would give to the modern human, if you're building him from scratch, what would you give them? Like, what would be the priority things that you would give them? You've mentioned a lot of philosophy and different schools of thinking, different entrepreneurs, different people who are doing big things, but is there kind of like a resource bank that you would just be like, hey, start here?
Yeah, my goal in life is to build that into a free document. Like I have on my website, it's like the Better Human framework or philosophical framework or whatever. And my idea is to get all these main pillars of life. I mean, everything from like nutrition, fitness, like tangible things, to just like the more esoteric philosophical. A few of them that are at the top of that list are ownership, like complete and utter ownership of everything, like literally everything. There's nothing in your life that's not your fault, period. It's not a negative connotation. It's actually empowering when you realize it. When you realize that everything is up to you, is that not the most powerful thing somebody can give you? It's all up to you. You don't have to look at other people. Just figure it out. Do it, right? That's the most important thing, right? And that also ties into like it's a Stoic framework of control. I think that's what I call it. It's basically the Stoics that identified that like you control your perception and everything that flows from it. So anything that happens around is coming to you. You interpret it and respond to it, and then you put that energy out, and then something comes back again, and then you do it again. But it's still you that's the centerpiece. Everything out here is just it's variety. It's variable. It's whatever, right? Yeah. It still comes back to you as the constant, you know. And then, I mean, obviously, like read any of the great philosophers, like whatever strikes your fancy. I mean, definitely the Stoics. Definitely understand first principles, like the example of Elon with SpaceX. You guys know this story?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this is one that was in his the Elon Musk biography, Ashley Vance. It was. He was going around after PayPal. He wanted to buy a rocket. So he was looking in the used ICBM Russian market. And most of them were $30 to $50 million. He didn't have $30 to $50 million, right? He thought he could find a deal. He kept flying around like, no, this is just what it costs. So he did the math. I believe the story was like he was on a jet back from Russia or something. And he's like doing the math on a napkin, right? And he's like, what are the costs of the raw materials that goes into a rocket? How much silicone, steel, aluminum, how much rocket fuel? And what is that on the open market? He did the math and he's like, let's say for round numbers, it was $5 million. Why is that number 5 million when a rocket's 50 million? The math's not adding up here. So then he looked into the aerospace industry. Every company that provided a part for the rocket, which in this case was potentially hundreds of thousands of parts, the way the industry was is you source all these from all these companies, they send them to you. Each one has an invoice with a profit margin built into it. And then the cost of your rocket with each part just grows and grows and grows and grows. And so the big innovation for SpaceX was we're going to print as much of this shit in-house as possible. They took it from, I mean, eventually when they made it work, the average launch, I think was like 10 million that they got it down to. It used to be like 50 to 75, maybe even 100 to just ship something into space. They got it down to 10. They landed the $3 billion contract with NASA, saved the company. And the story is that was even the last launch they had no money after that. Now, multi-billion dollar company. Now, I mean, talk like when you ask Elon, you know, what's it like being an entrepreneur? He's like, it's like eating broken glass or whatever, you know, it's like, And that's a different level. I mean, come on, guys. Like I sell products on the internet. Like, I'm not talking like pretending I'm Elon, but it's a lot of the same principles that apply. Like you have to be willing to potentially have your entire livelihood on the line where like everything you worked for years, it just could be poof gone in a day. And you're just like, what do I do with myself? Now that is hard from an ego risk for most people. Most people live life to the safety of their ego. They don't live life to the optimization of who they are and their full actualization. That's just period, full stop, what it's about, right? And so, what was the question again?
Entrepreneurship. Building them up. Yeah.
Philosophy for the modern.
Yeah.
So that was the first principles concept though.
Yes.
That's what it tied back to because he went at it from a first principles perspective and said, what does it take from raw materials, raw earth materials to launch a rocket in space? And he used that to reverse engineer. And basically he disrupted the entire aerospace industry. Now think about this for a second, how amazing this is. You have an industry with thousands of companies, thousands or millions of people, billions and billions and billions of dollars. And nobody thought, what's a more efficient way to do this? Like, why? Isn't that insane?
Yes.
How many other things? Banking is a good example. I mean, Bitcoiners are in the room. They probably ask this question all the time. Like, it's just done that way when it doesn't have to be. We have the technology to basically get rid of the modern financial advisor, the modern banker, all of these physical tellers. It can all be gone poof in a day like that. The technology is there, but the incumbents will hold on for years and years and years to come. And so those main things. And then, like we said, figure out a way to get rapid feedback for yourself and maybe even if it's business related for potential customers, right? So like door-to-door sales is a good one. Cold calling, finding a sport where like you get into the flow state and you crash and burn, surfing, rock climbing and whatever, right? Like a lot of these things, they lend themselves to having a little bit of physical risk and or financial risk, right? And then it's kind of hard. And what that does is that puts you in a flow state. Like all the flow research is about, it has to be kind of hard and then you really focus on it. And what that does is you get this kind of like self-reinforcing mastery loop where you get good at getting good. And then you apply that, dude, to, like you said, baseball players, sports, whatever, to business, dating, relationships, whatever thing you want to achieve. It's on the other side of rapid learning, lots and lots of feedback, lots and lots of action. And it's called the success loop. It's action. I think it's action. So action, result. It's just like this forever. It never ends. And that's all life is. Yeah. Like if you wake up tomorrow and you don't eat for a month, your body will just die. Like, so you have to maintain it. Like life is always some form of action, response.
Harry's question made me think about you being a father to 3 young kids. And I'm just curious, like, what are the big things for you that if you pass those things on successfully to your kids, you're like, all right, I actually did a really good job as a dad?
Become intrinsically motivated and do things for yourself and really opt out of society and its indoctrination and its status quo as much as you can. And that would, like you would have, that's kind of like the broad view. You would have all the logic tree underneath that, where it's like, you don't need to go to college. If you don't, like, if you want to, it's fine. Do what you want to do. That's the point. You can go to college, you can not go to college. You can start a business, you can not start a business. Like I probably, if you would ask me 10 years ago, would have been like, you should be an entrepreneur. I don't believe that anymore. If he doesn't want to be an entrepreneur or she, then don't, right? But I would say, I would kind of addendum that by saying, but try to control your time and where you're at and like what you work on to the most of your ability and become valuable to whoever you're working for, so that you do have leverage to work and live in the way you want. Because like, if you look at the modern industrialized like corporate structure, it was very much based on office buildings where people had to go there so managers can keep check, or even just to have communications, like, because it was hard to communicate and have meetings and things, right? That doesn't exist anymore. Now there are certain benefits to working in person, and that's a completely different discussion. But if you're coming up in the modern world, like, you have to build skills to be able to develop value for the marketplace. And then you use that to live the life you want to live. Like, to me, that's success. And right, like Earl Nightingale, as you guys know, grave mind, right, baby?
Mind.
He is like the grandfather of motivational speaking. And everybody on YouTube right now, go to The Strangest Secret, just listen to that. Listen on a repeat 10 days in a row, it'll change your life, right? And then he said his definition of success was striving for a worthy goal, right? It didn't matter what you did or how you made. It's like, in fact, if you made $1 million, that was your goal, you're not a success until you set another goal. Because that's kind of like the human pursuit of some kind of success and or some kind of goal, not even success, just goal, right? And so I think like, if you can do that on your own terms and not have to give up who you are or force who you are into some box or whatever to meet somebody else's prerogative, then that is, to me, the most successful human on the planet. And then you can like spend time with friends, or you can give back, or you can do charity, like whatever you want to do after that. That's winning, dude. Like, because what we see on social media from 99% of people that pretend they're winning, they're not winning. They're not in my opinion.
Yeah. The first answer you gave me in response to your kids was for them to be intrinsically motivated. And I would imagine that desire for your kids it's almost difficult because it's like they're an extension of you. They're your little beings. You want to give them everything, but as a dad, if I give them everything, then that's going to fuck them and they're not going to be able to be intrinsically motivated. It's a really weird balance. It's not easy.
I don't think of my kids as mine, actually. They're just little humans that I have responsibility for, and like, I got to give credit to Allison. Like, I mean, both of us, we kind of come to these same, like, we're very like-minded and first principles mindset and natural and holistic and things like that. And, we've read some of the same books, and she, I've informed her a lot of my ancestral mindset, like understanding where humans came from, understanding the modern environment. How's that mismatch? How can we adjust, right? How modern school system is a joke, like all these different things. And so we've come to a lot of the same conclusions. I didn't really force it either. I kind of just like talked about it, and she got interested, and then she went more interested in like the kids' development route. And so but we came to the same conclusion that our kids are homeschooled forever. That was the conclusion we came to. The conclusion was they're never stepping foot in the public education system ever, right? So they're not mine, but I'm going to try to give them. In fact, I don't even know like if I would leave them anything. I don't know. I haven't answered that question.
You're figuring it out.
Like maybe I'll leave some Bitcoin that they can't touch until a certain time. But even then, the rules would be you're not allowed to sell. This is Bitcoin. What's wrong with you? I'll write that into the will or something. I don't know. But it's like I don't know.
Blockchain.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough one because there are pros and cons. And I guess the one point that I could be convinced of maybe is if the world was going to really implode, then I think financial resources, because that's probably what we're talking about here mostly, right, would be something to have maybe in an emergency situation, or maybe dispersed on a monthly schedule at certain times of their life in certain ways so that they wouldn't become dependent on it, but they can maybe use it to have certain experiences, or maybe they could use it to invest or something like that. I don't know what that answer is, but it would definitely not be something where you have all this money, because I actually believe that I did a post about this recently. Why do rich kids never change the world? Very rarely. Maybe there's some exceptions. Because they're born into prosperity. They don't have that same drive and struggle that people that change the world do, right? Oprah lived in her car. Paul Mitchell lived in his car. Bezos was actually one of the examples where he's just a freak of nature, and he actually, I think, had a middle-class upbringing, but then he had a cushy Wall Street job. Yes. Freak of nature. Wall Street grew up well, but then when he actually went out to entrepreneurship land, like $100,000 in student debt, like everyone thinks he was like born, like no, like he built that shit on his own, right? Even beside that though, it doesn't matter, because what we're talking about is duality here. If you're born into abundance and you don't have to struggle to acquire resources, you're not going to really be good at doing things that bring you resources. Because you don't have the skills. You didn't have to work for it, right? But if you come from nothing, then you have this drive to be so far away from that nothing that you end up creating tremendous value in the marketplace, in the world, and then you become disproportionately wealthy as a result, right?
When you say duality, you're talking about looking at one thing from two perspectives, or what exactly do you mean by that, just for the listener?
Everything has two perspectives, because everything is a balance of opposing forces, right? If you, the most obvious examples are, what is night if there's no day? Like, think about it for a second. Can you explain to me what night is if you don't have day as the counterpoint, or hot and cold? What is hot without cold?
I definitely don't want a camera on me trying to describe it.
Well, yeah, get it like a doodle, try to doodle it out. Like, and that is true for struggle. So your meaning in life is exactly correlate to your struggles in life. And this is why we talk about the victim Olympics and whatever. Whatever your biggest struggle was, when you are on the opposite end of that, and it's like the best time of your life, you have more appreciation and joy out of that end than because this existed, And I mean, like, this is one of those things, like, I don't always know how you can apply it in life. Like, there are, like, I guess the way I apply it is, guys, literally, this is so prescient. It's insane. So 2 days ago, I told you I wasn't feeling good. I got, I think, a little bit of adrenal fatigue again. I got to cut coffee. I'm like repairing my back and adjustments, and I did some needling, all these things. My body and also my brain doesn't turn off. Yes. So like, I'm getting to that point in life where like I need to like watch a movie at night for the sake of forcing myself to not think about work because like it's just so overactive.
You have
right?
to force yourself to unplug.
I have to force myself.
Your brain doesn't stop.
Right. And what that does is like your brain uses a lot of your energy in your
Yeah.
waking day. So like I might be laying there doing this, but like my brain's doing shit
Yeah.
and my body's like, it still is in almost kind of like a fight or flight situation. It's so aggressive, right? It's going so much. And so I got to figure out like a way to actually decompress from that. And then you have workout and sauna and all these other stressors, like healthy stressors, like fasting. The reality is they're all stressors. And I think I just keep piling them up and they feel good and whatever. But then my body's like, nope, you're tapped out, done, stop. Like literally a week. And with that came, I feel like nothing's working. I'm telling you, 2 days ago, I'm like, dude, should I just like quit everything, go live in a cave somewhere? You know, in fact, I even have these thoughts like, if everything blows up tomorrow, I think I'm gonna move to Colombia or the Philippines with the whole family and like live on like $1,000 a month, and I'll just get like one client and I'll do one thing for them for $2,000, and I'll live like a king or whatever, you know. But it was more an exercise in simplifying and getting out of inflation and the American like in Austin, like what we pay for what we get is is a joke. In fact, my buddy has a place in Medellin, Colombia. He showed me his bill. This will blow your mind, guys. He showed me a bill of his Ubers on his bank account. You could probably visualize on your thing. If you look at your bank statement, you see like Uber, Lyft,
Yeah.
45, 47, 65. That was a long one. His was $1, 90 cents, 120, what, 220. I get the guy double tip. Like it's insane. And it's for the same service. Get from point A, point B with a vehicle. It's crazy, right? But that's like a whole nother rabbit hole to discuss. And I had this feeling like nothing's working. I'm sick of doing all of it. I want to just stop. Now, of course, this is very much aligned with like, I feel like shit right now. And if I even think about work, I feel overwhelmed because it's like a visceral, body's tired, but body has to do that work. So you're just like, it feels like so much. And that went with it. But now today and Monday, I feel better. I'm like back at it. But it's like, so that's duality. It's like those really hard times where I feel like I don't even know what I'm doing half the time, right? Like, it's so weird. It's like, you've done it, but you still feel like you don't know what you're doing. Like, is it working? I think it's working, right? Like I have a 6-month plan, a 12-month, you know, and like I said, being an entrepreneur a lot of times is just like, it's an exercise in looking wealthy, but like really being cash poor because you just like invest. And then at some point you're like, am I supposed to make some money at some point? You know? And like, again, I have a story where I like sold off my company and I had to like buy it back. So like, it doesn't happen to everybody, but even when that was happening, I thought that exit, guys, was going to be a $10 million exit that was going to change my life.
You thought that was it?
I thought it was it. In fact, I was already planning for fucking retirement. And then 2 years goes by and I like an exit's out the window. In fact, what they owe me, I got to write that off. That's gone. I thought that was my money. Now I got to buy it back and run it. Now I got to put money into myself. And then like I'm doing it. And then like, you know, I get that high of like making shit happen and it's going good or whatever. And in reality, it's like still a good deal. I got the company back. It didn't die. I've almost tripled the business since then. It's all great shit. But then I'm at that point again where I'm like in the rigmarole again. And I get those feelings of like, is there an end here or whatever? And it's like, I'm telling you, they tell you it's a grind. Yes, let me tell you, it's a grind.
Yeah. When we tell people that we're partnered with you and we say, hey, we're partnered with Colin, there's 2 words that most commonly come up to describe you. The first word is tenacious and the second word is very intense. And I'm curious your thought process on those 2 words to describe you.
Or just intense, because the tenacity comes from the intensity.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, honestly, it's one of those things that I have thought about over the years. Cause like I've had some friends that, there's one example of a friend here in Austin. When I moved here, we became close friends and he was also like an entrepreneur aspiring, whatever. But then his like goals in life changed a little bit. And it was more like he wanted to be more mellow and whatever. And I'm telling you, the relationship just kind of faded. You know, and I hadn't thought about it until recently. I think it was an energy thing. I just don't think he could handle that. And it's like with certain people, I do dial it back if I've sensed that in the past. And I don't know what it is, man. Some people just like can't handle it. To me, like I love being around. I want people to fucking be in my face and motivate me, like,
Yes.
you know, and maybe not every second of the day, but like at home, I'm way more chill or whatever. But when it comes to like business and work and this mindset stuff, like, yeah, the only mode is like on 100,000%. And so I don't know, it is an interesting thing. I mean, they're right. And I do sometimes say things that people maybe don't like because they're not PC. But in my mind, I would rather push people to be better than try to fit in their box for them to be comfortable. Cause that being comfortable is not doing them any favors anyways. So I'm just about like, let's all get better. And the thing is, you can come to me and I'll help anybody as much as possible. A lot of times for free,
Yes.
right? But at the same time, if you come out with a bad idea, I'll tell you you're fucking wrong. and I'll give you all the reasons why. In fact, I want to start a new podcast, Why You're Wrong. I think I'm going to call it that.
You should.
I'm going to, so for example, the rich don't pay taxes, Why You're Wrong, and 30-minute episode on why that's based on numbers, a joke. Think about this a second, just on this topic, because I want to practice this, right? When you pay property taxes on that $1 million house you own, how much more are those taxes? When you spend your $100,000 on your lifestyle, whatever it is, you're paying sales tax on all of that. On your investment income, you're getting capital gains taxes on that. And if you're a 10 millionaire, you're probably paying something like $1 million to $2 million. I mean, let's say 500 if you're really good, to $1 million in taxes every year, no matter what, without fail, period, full stop. And then every time you buy something, you're paying taxes. Every time you give money to your kids, you have to pay a gift tax. When you die, the government wants 50% as an inheritance tax or a death tax. There's literally a death tax, guys. It just pisses me off, these narratives that are just literally what we've seen is that the mainstream narrative is the opposite of truth. And we know this from the meat space. Meat is bad for you. What? Meat's the best thing you could eat, right? Maybe organs, but that's meat too, Exactly. It's insane.
Yeah. One of the reasons I was so excited about this conversation is I feel like it's going to be a really cool time capsule for us to come back to in a year or two and just look at and see where we were in this moment in time and where we got to. And I think we've talked so much about your story, but what we're building with Noble is just so exciting. I think all three of us are just ready to blow it up and make it something incredibly special. So I'm just pumped that all three of us are in business together and able to run at something together.
I agree. If you want to see more, let me know. I'll come down here.
Yeah. So May 27th, product ships, nobleorigins.com.
Yeah. Well, we're in pre-sale and we're literally already selling half of what we have coming before it's even hit the dock. And I think we're supposed to get it shipping tomorrow, which means we'd get it by Friday, as long as the freight companies don't lose anything or mess it up, which they always do. Another business, start a freight company and do good, make it good, multi-million-dollar business opportunity right there. Now, of course, you got to buy some trucks and whatnot, but I'm telling you, the amount of opportunity there is in the marketplace to just take something that is archaic and doesn't work well and just do it better. And clients will beat down your door to give you money. It's insane.
You just need a think tank where you can just spout out ideas and just have GMs just running your businesses for you. That's what you need.
Yeah, I know. But then the other part of me wants to just go live in a cave and read biographies all day and maybe podcast about it. That's my goal. I want to maybe have some investments, but be able to just do a podcast and read and whatever and maybe advise. That's what I'm working towards. And do that from anywhere, on the farm or on a boat or whatever. So. Well,
that's why we need people to buy animal-based protein powder from Noble.
We do.
So,
but also it's amazing. You literally, there's no more complete all-in-one you can have. Well,
your kids couldn't stop drinking it. They thought they were drinking chocolate milk at KetoCon.
They are, because we put it in the raw milk and it's chocolate milk and they ask for it all the time. And we only give it to them in the morning because, there's chocolate in it or whatever. But even the vanilla, when we get it, now they can say, Dad, can I have vanilla milk? And I'd be like, let's see, any caffeine in there? It's 5 p.m. I can do a cost, it's that meme where it's the math symbols show up. Are the kids going to be up all night or whatever? And they're like, yes, vanilla milk, you can have it.
That's something we've been toying with is the concept of just demonizing food groups. It's not the food group. It's all preparation methods. So conventional chocolate milk, Hershey syrup, 20 ingredients in that, pasteurized skim milk, no nutrients in it, loaded with sugar, versus what we're talking about, raw nutrient dense milk with all the enzymes preserved, and then Noble, which is beef protein powder, collagen, colostrum, stevia, cocoa powder. Organs. That's a fucking superfood. Organs.
Yep.
That's an absolute superfood. So it's not the food itself, it's all the preparation. So
yeah. Well, that's the wild origin. I mean, I built that company based on sourcing the cleanest stuff I could find on the market. Literally, if that means I have to go to Australia to get this certain grass-fed whey protein, because most of the stuff in the market is actually a byproduct of the cheese making process where they separate the whey and the curds and they use chemicals a lot of times or whatever. And then that stuff sits and who knows how it's transported. It's just not buying whey from that and buying whey that's made directly from raw milk. That's another innovation. Let's take raw milk and make whey instead of let's make cheese and then have an industrial waste product. That's how the entire whey protein industry was created. It was this guy I think I can do something with this whey. And whey is actually surprisingly nutritious. You can actually make it at home as a liquid and not powder it. So that's another cool thing to do. I'd be interested to make a raw milk whey or something and just drink it and add it to smoothies and stuff,
I love it.
More free alpha.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, it means a lot to us to have you in studio. It means a lot to be able to partner with you. And as Harry said, we're just looking forward to using this as a time capsule and see where we are the next time we have you on your show.
Awesome.
So we appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Everybody. Cool.